Hello, friends. Come on, Betsy. Come on. Yeah, here you go. Today, I want to talk about the surprising benefits of selling out. Of course, I meet a lot of other writers, and often when people find out that I'm a professional novelist, they might say something like, oh, I just write like silly fanfic or, whatever. There is certainly like kind of a hierarchy of writers where even if you are published, you might feel sometimes like, oh, I just write romance, I just write, YA. You might feel maybe not self-conscious because chances are you like what you write and you might even be fiercely defensive of it. But that's the thing. You might feel a little defensive when you're around writers that write more like important stuff because you sense that they might judge you for writing trash. I've certainly been in that circumstance before in my own life, where I have even felt like a judgmental attitude from unpublished writers because they write something that's more important. And I think it's just like a hard to avoid topic when you're a writer. Like, I try to keep a very non-judgmental attitude about what people write because I think there's a benefit in every type of writing. It's hard to totally ignore that feeling is out there. And certainly for people who went to college for writing, it was often encountered in college courses or with professors or fellow students, etc. So today I'm here to defend trash. And one thing that I noticed when I was first getting into serious publication, I started out writing young adult novels, traditionally published. And a lot of the most successful authors in young adult, I noticed, had started out writing fanfic. So eventually I realized that writing fanfic had been a really good training ground for these authors to have a good understanding of how to connect with their audience through their writing. And I kind of regretted that I didn't have a big fanfic period because I thought I'd probably be better at this if I had. But if you are inclined to be snobbish, then the first thing you would think about that is, well, I don't want to write something like the most popular young adult authors. That's mostly trash anyway. Genres that are often marked as being trash are anything that's sold in a grocery store, anything women prefer, as well as for men, things that nerdy boys like, anything that's too sexy, sometimes action novels, or anything that's appeared in a pulp magazine, or anything that was originally inspired by anime or any kind of Asian trend. The list goes on. So many things might be considered as being kind of a trashy genre depending on who you're talking to. I always wanted to be a fantasy author, and I'd say at this point in our cultural moment, fantasy and sci-fi are a bit in a like weird zone where fantasy and sci-fi used to mostly be considered more sort of trashy, pulpy genres. And now there are some that are held up as great classic literary works or modern novels that have amazing insight, cultural cachet, and things to think about deeply. Oh, which reminds me, another genre that is sometimes considered trash is anything that's more happy than it is sad. Such as anything cozy or small town or. But anyway, sci-fi and fantasy have kind of a mixed reputation at this point. And if you got a bunch of readers in a room and ask them what constitutes like a commercial fantasy novel versus a literary fantasy novel, I'm sure you would have a lot of arguing back and forth about what books exactly are commercial and which ones are literary. Which means that as a writer, I had aspirations to write a great work as well as aspirations to write a very commercial work at the same time, sometimes clashing within me. I've talked about this a little bit in some of my other videos, but I'm sure that you also know that a lot of books that we now regard as classic works were either written to be more of the commercial works of their day, like the Victorian serial authors such as Dickens, or they are authors that wrote some stuff that was commercial at the time, Like Louisa May Alcott, the author of Little Women, wrote a lot of like potboiler fiction for magazines and serials, and she was able to make money that way. She did it under a pen name, and from what I gather, she was a little bit ashamed of writing this stuff, whereas like Little Women was something that felt more like a real work to her. But then even the so-called real work, if it becomes really popular, can turn into more of a burden eventually. Like I've been reading Ellen Montgomery's novels. Anne of Green Gables was her first novel and was one that flowed out of her and that she very much loved. It was a big success, and I think when she wrote it, she was very proud of it. But everybody loved Anne so much that she just kept feeling like she had to write about Anne over and over until she was clearly just like totally sick of Anne. And then a lot of the people that we think as like classic sci-fi authors started out just writing like pulp for magazines. They probably didn't even think that people would still be reading those stories in collections and books to this day. And that some of them would be stories that we would refer back to, you know, so-and-so wrote a story with this idea back in 1955 and it's finally come true, or, you know, it still seems relevant to current society. I don't know to what degree they were thinking that that was going to happen, but my guess would be probably not much. So the lines between commercial and literary have always been blurry, but this video really is not about the blurred line, but really about writing something that just, you are not trying to be literary, you are not trying to write anything great, you kind of know that you're writing something trashy and you're just doing it. I want to talk about the actual benefits of doing that. Most writers who have a career writing will have some point where they're doing this. It might be writing under a pen name. It might be writing work for hire, which is when you take on like a project for like a book packager or something like that. For example, if you agreed to write a title in a long-running series like Nancy Drew or Babysitter's Club, something like that. Or you might write fanfic for fun. Really, anything you're writing where you're just writing from what you find fun or what you find sexy or just like something that's enjoyable in the moment, and or writing for money. This also might be some of the fastest writing that you ever do, especially if you are writing professionally, like you might have taken on a tight deadline, or you might be churning out books for self-publishing, and you might be exhausted all the time. If you followed my channel for a while, you'll know that I had a period where I wrote 40 books in 4 years, and they were all written to market, to make money. At the time that I was writing them, I wish that I had had Magic Mind. We've had some trouble with shipments here in Western North Carolina ever since Hurricane Helene, so I ran out of it for like 10 days or something. And when I finally got it back, it seemed like a great time to restart the Magic Mind 7-day challenge to see if it really did change my ability to get things done throughout the day. I just feel like it gives me like more of a slow, steady energy for like many hours, as opposed to like coffee, which might give me like 1 whole hour, but then kind of crashes afterwards. So thank goodness that I'm restocked on Magic Mind, because I've got to catch up on my Cozy November writing challenge to get 30,000 words this month. And as long as you're not having delivery issues due to a hurricane, having a subscription is great because you don't really have to think about it. It'll just show up. A subscription also gets you the biggest discount, up to 48% off. You can try it risk-free, and be sure to use my code FOXGLOVE20. That's FOXGLOVE 20. So during the years that I was writing basically 10 books a year, I was always exhausted. I was not really studying the craft. I didn't have critique partners. I didn't have editors. I had already done a lot of like professional, traditionally published novels, so I felt like I knew enough to get by in indie publishing, and I just like needed to get on that treadmill, make money, get a good savings bank going, and then I would have the freedom to do what I wanted eventually, fingers crossed. But I definitely felt like a sellout. I it wasn't really what I wanted to do, and I felt like I was losing some years as far as becoming a better writer, that I was just like, this is purely for money. Not that I didn't enjoy the books I was writing. I did enjoy them quite a bit in many cases, but it still wasn't what I would have chosen, and I was aware that I was kind of writing like trashy books. So on one hand, it was a lot of fun because I had really enthusiastic fans, and I did end up making quite a bit of money, but there was also like this guilt, like, I thought of them actually as my Louisa May Alcott pot boiler years, and was like, I can't wait until I finally get to write My Little Women. So this year, 2024, as I film this has been the first year that I have gotten back to writing the things that are more important to me, that I want to take more time and thought to work on. And this is when I realized something that really kind of surprised me. A couple months ago, I did a video on reworking an old manuscript. I'd recently had this moment where I really missed some of my older characters, and I just like wanted to spend time with them. But I'd written 2 books. Like, first I reworked them into a young adult novel back when I was primarily a young adult author. And then I rewrote the book as an adult novel. That was back in 2016. So I went and I pulled out the book and I looked at it, and I realized that my writing had changed tremendously since these earlier versions of the book. Some of the things I noticed was that my sense of pacing had changed. That was one of the biggest changes. I used to pace things like very briskly, and I didn't know how to slow it down at all. There were also some moments where like the plot just kind of seemed a little all over the place, and the character relationships didn't really feel as deep as they should be. And that really was not what I expected to find when I looked at the manuscript, because in my head, like, oh, the characters were great, the plot was exciting. Like, I loved this book at the time that I wrote it, and I didn't really think that I was going to pull it out and think like, oh gosh. Sorry if you can hear the cat sneezing in the background. Like, I've gotten a lot better, or at least different. I mean, it'll somewhat depend on your taste in books, but at least from my perspective, I was like, this isn't what I thought it was. I'm not fully connecting with these characters anymore. And it wasn't all just like the phenomenon of like putting the manuscript in the drawer and taking it out like 6 months later. It was literally like, there are things I now know how to do that I just didn't know how to do back when I wrote this. And that was when I realized, like, I have not put any real conscious thought into like studying the craft. But I have written a ton of books. And what I did end up doing was always thinking about how to connect the most deeply with my audience. And I do think that one of the best things that you can do for yourself as far as leveling up as a writer is just to write, and particularly to write complete projects as much as you possibly can. The more things that you can finish, even if they don't feel like the best that you're capable of, the better you will become. But it's not always easy, because you can get really in your head. You have an ideal of like, this is the book that I really want to write. This is how I really want my great work to be. And you can get very critical. You can feel very frustrated that you're not up to par. You can keep feeling like, I need to attend another seminar. I need to read another craft book. I need to get another critique partner. I need to find out how to get there. How can I create this thing? And sometimes it really is as simple as you just need to write a lot. And that is the benefit of writing the trash. And I've been doing this a long time, as in, I was always the kid who wanted to be a writer and was already writing all kinds of stuff when I was like 6 or 7. And particularly by the time I got to like age 9, I was already like, I'm going to be a writer. I'm writing stuff. I didn't finish a lot of things. Actually, I finished almost nothing, but nevertheless, I was very committed to the idea that I was going to be a writer. And I was writing all the time. And many of us, when we first start writing, if it's like a childhood or a teenage ambition, or even something that you're just doing for fun in your college or adulthood, You might have this glorious period where you're not self-conscious, you're just having fun, and in fact, you're primarily writing for yourself. The themes that matter to you, the little things that just bring you pleasure and delight. You're writing from your heart, maybe you're writing from your loins in some cases, but you're writing for yourself. If you start writing at an older age, it's a little more likely that period is not as long. Sometimes I meet people who started writing because they liked their writing classes in college, or it was just something they always wanted to do and they didn't start doing it until their kids went to school. You know, everybody's got their own timeline. And I know even though I was writing as a little kid, there's other things that I wanted to learn how to do in adulthood, and I don't approach them from a childhood kind of playful way anymore. Like, I would love to do something musical, but at one point I got a ukulele, and, you know, I didn't like mess around with the ukulele. It was like, how can I learn how to be a great ukulele player? And that's not always, like, there's benefits to that approach and there's downsides to that approach, which is you might not have as much fun, but you're also kind of conscious of like your time as an adult. You don't want to just mess around for years and not really get anywhere. You're probably approaching it more from like, I want to get good at this as quickly as possible, so it's a little more of like a practical hobby. Even if it's not for money, you might be thinking like, I want to take my ukulele to a local song circle, or I want to play a ukulele song for my YouTube channel, or, you know, you're a little more likely to have like a real goal. So if you've gotten into writing past that playful stage, you might not really have had a big play stage in writing. But I did, because I wanted to be a writer from the time I was a kid. So I was writing playfully for many years. Then in my early 20s, I got really serious about craft. And it was all about craft, getting better. I had, you know, tons of writing books, critique partners. I went to one conference. I was pretty broke, so that was about all I could do as far as conferences or classes. But, you know, like, it was a serious study at that point because I wanted to be professional and I was very hungry for it. And the playful part of it kind of drained out of me, and it became more of something I was doing from the head rather than something I was doing from the heart. That's not a bad thing. There is a point where if you want to be a professional writer, you're probably going to have to step back from your personal desires and think of it in a little bit of a more detached way. How can I connect with an audience? What parts of the craft am I lacking? But if you get to the point where you're just writing something trashy, a little bit of that play can creep back in. When I started writing indie books for money, I also felt like I had to reconnect with my inner teenager and think like, what did she like? What kind of ridiculously broody man with a tragic past and, you know, a girl who discovers she has powers would have thrilled me as a teenager? Because that's what will sell. And like, it was fun to just kind of like stop thinking about like whether something was silly and just have a good time. But I didn't realize that in the act of having a good time, I was also just going to write a lot. And in the course of writing a lot, my confidence as a writer naturally just grew. I got better at constructing a plot, constructing different kinds of plots, playing with different genres and tones, writing books with different types of pacing, experimenting with different types of scenes, getting myself out of plot problems that in the past might have had me stuck for months, and now I was able to like attack them from a few different angles until I could untangle that knot and just keep going. I just got better at all those things. And part of the reason I was able to write so fast, I definitely think, is because I already had quite a few years of professional experience and finished novels behind me. Like, most people can't write that quickly when they first start because you really haven't learned how to solve problems and just like plot a whole book. But no matter what, it made me think that any bit of snobbishness I had about what I was writing just needed to go out the window, because actually it is a great way to level up as a writer. Even if your ultimate goal is to become more of a literary writer, I would say that any aspiring writer should make sure that they take some time to just be playful. Maybe connect with your inner child or your inner teenager. Write some goofy fanfic. Write some indie book under a pen name that's in some genre that you never really thought you would be known for, but just like have a good time. Write something that's derivative of one of your favorite other books or video games or TV shows, whatever. Like, just have a grand old time for a little bit. And you might find that when you come back to the more serious project, you're actually better. So yeah, that is my big writing advice for the day. Make sure that at some point in your writing journey, you take some time out to just have some goofy fun and just like finish some stuff for the fun of it, and don't think too hard. And when it's all done, you might find that you're actually a better writer. Have you had a period writing anything that you felt was kind of trashy, or have you ever experienced a situation where somebody was like kind of judging the type of writing that you do? Do you ever feel like that tension between like real writing versus like trashy writing? Because it's something that I have kind of struggled with at times. I will be honest, because I started out really like from a love of children's books and wanting to go into like kid lit, but through young adult writing. And it was kind of like the early days of what young adult is now, which is like big, booming, popular genre that is read by a lot of adults and, you know, it's talked about on Book Talk and Booktubers and Bookstagram. In 2006, when I first started writing, it certainly was not like that kind of vibe. It was more just like, this is part of kid lit. And I was thinking about all the classic books that I loved so much as a kid and had reread to tatters, and really wanting to do something like that. And it felt like a real higher calling, literary kind of ambition. But children's books have not always been regarded like that. And in those early days, I would start meeting people that were writing young adult from the romance world. And I was a little snobbish toward them at that point. I felt kind of like, that's not like real children's books. That's not literary. That's just kind of like trashy, like writing romance for teens. And now I feel ashamed that that was ever in the back of my head a little bit. But it really just kind of points to how hard it can be to escape like the different levels of snobbishness that we as a society have about different genres at different points in time. Like, it changes what types of genres we think are trashy versus like more quality or more thoughtful. So, I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about. I also have some good news about my little bookstore. If you've been following this channel, you will know that I did work in a charming little used bookstore. It was on the main street of historic Marshall, North Carolina, and it was packed with books, packed with character, and it all washed away during Hurricane Helene, and now my part-time job is gone. But I just talked to my boss, and he was able to talk to the building owners, and they said they are fixing it up and they are not intending to rent it to anyone else or sell the building or anything like that. So it sounds like the prospects are good for us coming back, and there's a GoFundMe going on. So if you have a few extra dollars to spare and you love used bookstores, it would mean a lot to me if you threw just a little support toward our bookstore. The link is in the description. Or if you don't have any money, but you know a lot of people that love books too, if you want to share it on your socials, that would also be an awesome little signal boost for us. Thank you so much for all the support you guys have already given to my town and the bookstore and some of the other GoFundMes that I've shared. It really means so much to me. It has been such a rough autumn, but seeing people come together to help us out here and fix up the town has just been really, really heartening. And if you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove. I've been a professional novelist for the most part since 2009, so don't forget to click the like and subscribe, and I also have a Patreon and a Substack. They both have a free tier as well as a $5 tier that gets you access to my Discord, bonus videos, etc. And don't forget to support the channel and your brain by checking out the link in the description to Magic Mind with my code FOXGLOVE20. Sun's going down and I'm gonna go read some goofy ass shoujo manga. So I will see you next time. Bye!